this country is at war with Germany.
We had to do a job, and we did the job, and that was it.
The men had to go and fight, and the women had to take their place.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
So, hello and welcome back to another episode. This week, we're going to be talking tanks, but specifically Hobart's funnies. So they're all the weird little creation of tanks that might possibly have helped win the war. So, Percy Hobart was born in the late 1800s, that's the one. He was a British Army officer who developed specialised tanks that aided the invasion of Normandy, basically. He graduated from the Royal Military Academy in Woolwich in 1904. And Hobart was commissioned in the Royal Engineers. Hobart served in India and then fought in France and the Iraq War during World War One, believing tanks were the future of ground warfare, because obviously in World War One, that's where we were introduced to tanks. Hobart joined Britain's newly formed Tank Corps in 1923. In 1934, he formed and took command of the 1st Tank Brigade. He was promoted to Major General in 1937, but his forward-thinking views and difficult personality had upset the status quo of traditionalists in the British Army establishment. And therefore, in 1938, he was transferred to Egypt. I mean, yeah, if you're going to cause trouble, let's just ship you off somewhere, shall we? There he raised and trained the beginnings of the 7th Armoured Division, which achieved fame during World War II as the formidable Desert Rats. In 1939, he was taken off active duty, while serving as a corporal in his local Home Guard until 1941. He was recalled to active service by Prime Minister Winston Churchill. In 1943, he raised and took command of the 79th Armoured Division. In this post, he climbed and destroyed the walls. He launching unconventional projectiles, collectively known as Hobart's funnies. These innovations included a range of tanks. So let's look into some of them. Which ones have you got?
So I got
first?
So one of the more famous ones that he came up with was the Churchill Crocodile, which if you're a World War II fanatic, you might have recognised that name. So the name Crocodile was given due to partly the physical aspects of the adapter tank, because so you've got the main Churchill tank, if you imagine it, and then it was towing basically a trailer that was connected to the tank, which held the fuel for the flamethrower. And it was also a bit of a psychological trick by the Allies as well. I think they named it Crocodile, to kind of combat how the Tiger tank would strike fear into the hearts of the Allied soldiers, which makes sense. You've got to try and get any kind of edge that you can in the battlefield. So the earliest example of a flamethrower being mounted to a Churchill was in the infamous Dieppe raid in 1942, which, as we know, it didn't go so well, Dieppe. But obviously the Allies took learnings from that and applied them to later. So even though it was a bit of a disaster, in the end it was put to good use. So in place of the whole machine gun, that was where the crocodile element kind of fitted in. That was where the flamethrower element of the crocodile was placed. Had over a range of 100 meters. Which was much greater than the kind of man-made, backpack flamethrowers that you see. You see them in Saving Private Ryan, and they were heavily used in the Pacific as well. So as I kind of described before, it kind of towed the armored trailer, which, when that was full, carried 1,800 liters of fuel, which is insane. You think your car might hold maybe 50 liters. No, probably not 50 liters, probably more than that, actually. So if imagine your average car, and then this trailer would have held way, way, way more. Obviously used for a different purpose. So with that fuel in this trailer was also a nitrogen propellant that was required, that would then blast the combination of the fuel, and that was enough for 81-second bursts. And the way it was used was mainly for like clearing bunkers and maybe clearing any enemy positions. And again, that kind of psychological effect as well, because if you've got, say, a string of positions and your crocodile tank is kind of targeting here, if you're a soldier over here and you see that happening, you're going to turn tail and you're going to run, because you don't want to mess with that, because chances are it wasn't just the crocodile that was advancing. It will have been infantry alongside it, so these will have been used to kind of break through, and the infantry supporting it as well. So even though it was part flamethrower, it still maintained or retained, sorry, its 75mm main gun. Therefore, it could still function as a normal infantry supporting tank. So you could use the flamethrower element to kind of take out the closer infantry, like say up to 100 meters, and then use the 75mm gun if there was positions further back. So you've kind of got that perfect combination, really. And then as development continued, the flamethrowing element was developed into a kit that could be easily fitted to any Churchill Mark 7 tank. And that was one of the more famous ones. There's quite a few of Hobart's funnies that we came across, but I think that's one of the most famous ones, and maybe, dare I use the word, coolest as well. Maybe it's a flamethrowing tank. What more do you want? What's not to like?
Yeah, it is one of my favourites. I do like a crocodile with a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Why would you not?
Yeah.
Now, another famous funny is the crab, or the flail tank. So prototypes of this were ready by the end of September 1943. It was a Sherman tank. Basically, for those that don't know, it's got a massive spinny thing on the front with chains attached, and it sets off mines. So while flailing with its things spinning, it could only run at a speed of 1.6 miles an hour. But it had a mine detonating efficiency of 91%. That's pretty good.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's better than the old way, because I don't know if you've ever seen any of the footage of what they used to do in North Africa. They literally would have the bayonets, and the men would have to kind of sift through the sand with the bayonets. And you're thinking, that's not an efficient way to really, get through a minefield. So yes, a flailing Sherman tank is definitely a more efficient way.
Yeah, so the flailing arm, if you like, used to be manually operated. So your little tank crew had to get out and manually lift this up and down. I'm sorry, but if you're in the middle of a battle and you've got to do that, sod that.
Yeah.
So they made it hydraulic, basically, so you could push a button and it just did it itself. They also needed that movement to avoid hitting any obstacles, and it also packed better on a landing craft when you could have moved that and adjust it.
Yeah.
Could pack more on.
Yeah.
So when they added the hydraulics, those arms were strengthened. The trials were satisfactory. The mines laid them in the mud with barbed wire were successfully detonated, but those in the hedges were occasionally missed because the flails had a tendency of pushing the hedge over the mines and therefore protecting the mines. The rotor and the arm were damaged during some of the trials. 27 telemines detonated and damaged it, so they added a lot more armor. They had high confidence that the crab would work, and then production of 300 began almost immediately after testing, with the aim to have them ready by the end of March of 1944. So there was then another round of trials, which faced a new mine laying technique, where one mine would be buried deeper under another one. So the top mine was connected to the bottom one with a fuse. And the idea was that the flail tank safely detonated the first one, which would then set off the other one, but by then it would have been underneath the belly of the tank. The flails would actually cut the connection of the fuses. So if it had been more than so deep below level, basically the second one wouldn't go off because it would just get its fuse ripped out.
Yeah.
There was also an issue with the links on the flails. So the samples of the original flails were sent to 5 different manufacturers. They were tested. Some worked, some didn't. So each was set to an hour's flailing tested. Some of them only lost 16 links, and others lost 470 links.
Oh dear.
That's a massive, massive difference.
Yeah.
So obviously they picked the winner, which would last longer. So the easiest way I found to describe this, the links that didn't work were like boat anchor links and like sort of like necklace and bracelet links, so they actually were round and linked together. But the ones that worked better looked more like a bicycle chain link.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So they were a bit sturdier.
Yeah.
There was also an issue with knotting of the links. So I think with the newer links, obviously didn't knot itself and tie itself in a bow. The final design was not improved until the April. So you had the initial first 300, and then that's about a month later, April. Yeah, a month later.
Yeah.
And then they were available in June, but they actually missed the D-Day, the initial landings themselves in the first weeks. But they were in the first weeks of the Battle of France, and they managed to detonate 1,400 mines. So they did their job.
They did. They certainly did. And I think I was going to say, there's probably still elements of this used today in parts around the world. I can remember, this is going to be a bit of a strange one, but a Top Gear episode where they're doing a house demolition and they go to an army surplus, obviously not clothes, but military vehicle army surplus, and Jeremy Clarkson buys the ex-UN mine clearance vehicle, and it's the same thing. It's just kind of adapted. It's just metal prongs that rotate and spin. So you think this was something that was invented in the 1940s, and it's still used today. Obviously, altered, and it's will have been advancements in how the metal is cast and the construction and everything, but the idea is still the same. And I think it just shows how kind of forward thinking, maybe not just Percy Hobart, because I'm sure he will have had people around him that helped him with these ideas. It shows how forward thinking he was back then. With the Hobart's funnies, it was mainly either the Sherman or the Churchill, wasn't it? They were the two main tanks. So the other one that I found was another Churchill one. It was the Churchill Petard. And this is kind of one that's a bit funnier to look at. So this is the one where the tank's main gun has been replaced with a 290 millimeter Spigot mortar, which I'm sure a picture will appear magically in front of your eyes now if you're watching. And if you're not watching, why aren't you? You should head over to YouTube and you should watch and you should subscribe. So you can see this picture of this enormous Spigot mortar, and because of the size, it was nicknamed the Flying Dustbin. because that's pretty much what it was. If you imagine, it's a mortar that is getting flung, a great distance. And this idea came from the idea to breach substantial structures such as seawalls, bunkers, and pillboxes. So this dustbin was actually an 18-kilogram high explosive projectile, just think of the 290 millimeters and then 18 kilograms. 18 kilograms is quite heavy, so for that to be being hurled at you, if you're some German sat in a pillbox and you've got this 18-kilogram thing getting held at you, you ain't gonna last long. But one downside, a bit like when you were describing about the crab a minute ago that the crew had to get out, this was the same. The mortar had to be reloaded manually, externally, by one of the crew. So, yeah, it's not like your conventional tank where you're in it, you see them, you just reload the shells, you've got the shells right next to you. No. Someone has to get out and then manually lift this 18-kilogram mortar and place it in. You won't want to pull the short straw on that one. You're like, oh, it's your turn now. But I don't think it is. That's what I'd be saying. But despite that drawback, it had a range, a quite decent range of over 130 meters. But it was really most effective from around 70 meters. To kind of put it into context, roughly from what I could find, it said that 10 rounds might be needed to breach a 6-foot thick concrete wall. Now, depending on what region these were fighting in, obviously we know that the level of quality of the concrete in the Atlantic Wall and other German structures was brilliant to begin with, and then as the war dragged on, it got worse and worse because they were building things super quick. So, if one of these petards came across kind of a substandard structure, then it probably would have taken less than that. But that's more of one of the funnier, one of the funnies.
Another Sherman variant I found, which also did have a Valentine variant as well. So adding another tank in there as a Valentine was the DD tank, so the duplex drive tank. So for those that have seen clips of D-Day, probably recognise this. So it had a canvas screen attached to the deck of the tank. It had rubber columns inside the screen that would inflate. The canvas would therefore become hard and rigid and provide buoyancy. So it's basically a floating tank.
Yeah.
So why would you not want a floating tank?
Yeah, mental. Yeah.
Once the tanks landed, the columns instantly deflated and the tank functioned as a tank. The early prototypes found plenty of defects within the engine and the gearbox and a leaky hull. Apparently it took on 3/4 of a ton, 3 or 4 tons of water in just 3 or 4 minutes. Oof. In the first trial. That sunk very quickly.
Yeah.
So to get it from the landing craft onto the shore, they added propellers. So if you ever see pictures of them, if you look at the back, they've got 2 propellers on the back, so they can. It's literally a floating tank. You wouldn't think a heavy tank like a Sherman would be able to float, but they did.
Yeah. Archimedes' law, isn't it? I swear, if part of the body is immersed in water, it will, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I suppose we should say, the reason these were kind of successful, weren't they? But they kind of weren't, and it came down to the weather on D-Day, didn't it? Really, some were let out way far back that these tanks kind of weren't designed to cope with that amount of swell in the water, the size of the waves, the depth of the water. So it was kind of, some were used successfully, others weren't, were they?
No, I think the Valentines were a little bit more successful because they were slightly lighter tanks than the Shermans.
Yeah.
But the Valentines ended up being more of a training and development vehicle to improve the Shermans. I think battle-wise, the Shermans were better. So instead of using like compressed air bottles to inflate the canvas, they swapped it with a compressor driven by the tank's engine instead. So it's like just little things like that. So that allowed the rate of inflation and the steering to be better. I'm not sure how you'd manage to inflate the screen and make the steering better, but I'm sure there's some engineeringness in there somewhere.
So going back to the Churchill, the other one that kind of I found, the last one that I found, or the last one I found interesting because there was many more, was actually the Churchill bridge layer. Yes, the Churchill bridge layer, which I very nicely got as a birthday present earlier this month, and I saw it and I thought, oh, I wonder if that's classed as a Hobart's funny, and technically it technically was. So the Churchill bridge layer was built on the turretless chassis of the Churchill, basically. So the Churchill tank, as you saw in the amazing Airfix illustration there, it's basically taking the gun off, and the bridge element is kind of added on top. So this was a specialized vehicle that could deploy its 30-foot bridge in just 90 seconds, which, if you think in 1940s terms, like a minute and a half to span a gap is insane. Because if you're trying to advance, you want to, argument's sake, if it's towards the end of the Normandy campaign, it's the Palisades gap is closing, the pocket's closing, and you want to push on the advantage, you don't want to be waiting ages to cross a bridge that or figure out a way to cross a river that the Germans have blown the bridge on. So to have something like this ready to go, 90 seconds, boom, you can carry on and go, was super crucial. So a bit like the crab, really, that you described earlier about they eventually came up with a mechanism. So the mechanism on the Churchill bridge layer involved a pivoting arm with rollers attached to the front, with the opposite end connected to the bridge's center. So a lot of engineering gubbins will have gone on, because you couldn't just stick this on and hope that it worked. It will have had to be balanced out, and everything like that. So this clever design ensured the bridge remained level throughout its deployment as the pivot arm lifted and then gently lowered it across the gap. So again, I think that's testament to kind of the Allies and our ingenuity, really. And I know sometimes, especially the British, we get lumped with a lot of, oh, that'll do. We were just, oh, that'll do. Sort of attitude. But we were quite clever when it counted.
Yes, we had our moments.
We did, didn't we? Yes. And this is one of them. So the combination of this quick deployment, like for 90 seconds, the strong load capacity, and the reliability of the Churchill chassis made the bridge layer an invaluable asset to British and Allied forces. And like I said before, especially this was important as they were marching across Europe, where rivers, craters, and destroyed infrastructure frequently threatened to impede progress. So yes, I'm very much looking forward to build that one. It's a bit of a different Airfix model, and something that you don't come across every day, but important nonetheless.
I find it interesting if modern day tanks are based on old tanks. So there's a modern day bridge layer, which thinks on a chieftain.
Yes. Yeah.
So obviously that's not with the chieftains. I think were in service for 80s, 90s.
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
So 50 years. No. Yes, 50 years after. My maths is not good.
That's all right.
So 50 years after World War II, and we're still laying bridges on a tank.
Yeah, exactly. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it works, it works.
Yeah. So if there's any other modern day tanks based on old tanks, pretty sure there's not a flamethrower tank in modern day age. So I think the Geneva Convention would have something to say about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, let us know, because I'd be quite interested to learn to learn that.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Well, there we go. Should we wrap it up?
Yes, can do. That's our take on Hobart's funnies.
Yeah, I found that super interesting. I've always kind of known about them, but it was nice to kind of dive into to Hobart himself, Percy Hobart himself. And fun fact, actually, his sister married Bernard Montgomery, actually.
Oh,
So Percy Hobart was the brother-in-law of Field Marshal Montgomery,
oh.
which might have helped him because, like we said at the start, with his kind of how he not commanded him, how he held himself and his like the way he interacted with people. I think his connections helped him. So that was interesting to learn about as well.
So in that case, if we've missed anything, or if you found other funnies you want us to cover, do let us know. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on whatever you're watching or listening is on to. And we'll see you next week.